Every single telemarketer calls you during dinner. We don't do that. If we do, we can't be friends anymore. But you've seen The Wolf of Wall Street and Boiler Room and Glengarry Glen Ross, Prime Gig, such amazing speakers. I mean, such talent. Not every vertical sells stock or
Mm.
high-end real estate. There are some incredible individuals out there that make and receive phone calls and do it ethically, and they really are artists of speech. They really have honed their crafts and they believe in it, like myself. I always believe that you pack more of a punch, through voice communication than just omni-channel non-voice of chat and email support. So
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Expert. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours? Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Richard Blank. And Richard, first of all, his last name is Blank. I'm not just saying that it was a blank. His last name's Blank. So always want to make sure I catch that. But Richard, we're going to be talking about a few things, which include COVID, which is starting to hopefully wane, but also the introduction of working from home and how you can or how you deal with company culture and whether or not it can be done when you're working from home. And then also talking a little bit about how you use rhetoric and delivery and word choice as part of your business and how that can be an impactful, kind of being an artist of words, so to speak. And then maybe a little bit we'll talk about KPIs or key performance index for call centers and how you can how people are getting lazy with speech in a digital world, and probably several other things from there. So, with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Richard.
hey, Devin, so happy to be back on my second podcast with you, the Inventive Expert.
Absolutely.
I cannot wait to share ideas with you and your amazing audience.
Hey, absolutely. And excited to have you back on. And just as a quick reminder for the audience, so Richard was a guest on the sister podcast, The Inventive Journey. So if you want to go and hear a little bit about more about Richard's journey and how he got to where he's at today, definitely go to check out that episode. But for those that haven't had a chance to check out that episode or saying, hey, I just want the condensed or short version of a much longer journey, give or introduce yourself a bit to the audience.
Sure, of course. I'm the CEO of Costa Rica's call center. We're a nearshore bilingual dedicated center here located in Costa Rica. I'm originally from Philadelphia, and my story really began at 27 years old when I had a 1 in a million opportunity to move abroad and work in my friend's call center. I learned it from the inside and out. In my mid 30s, I threw my hat in the ring, started my own company. I'm sitting on a 300-seat capacity call center, and we're about to celebrate our 15th year in business.
Well, that's exciting and a great introduction. So now with that much as an introduction, maybe kind of dive into the topics at hand. One of the things that I think that both employers and employees are both grappling with in kind of different forms or formats is the idea of working from home. And one is how or if or how you can successfully work from home. And I probably shifted different views over the course of my career. Even I worked from home for several years, well before working from home was in vogue. But it does introduce kind of that different dynamic or variable. So I guess the first question is can you successfully work from home, and kind of what are the bounds or the limitations from it, and how do you deal with the cultural aspect of or company culture, and kind of how do you or set things up to work from home, or can you?
Well, there's a sweet and a sour to it. I was very fortunate that my industry was versatile enough to have people work from home compared to a brick and mortar that did not have a choice. So I was able to, I guess, survive COVID and adapt accordingly. Now, let's look at the challenging side to it. In my industry, I believe in synergy. There is a lot of energy that is going on at a call center that you can feed off of. And so we're a very social environment. Attrition gets reduced when you work with a best friend, when you're doing live coaching and quality assurance. I believe that it sinks in a little bit faster than if you're doing it on your own. And there are certain things that you can pick up from other agents that you incorporate in your own life, socially and professionally. And I believe that those things were taken away from me. It's almost like working out at home compared to going to the gym. There is a huge difference there.
Mm,
And I myself, besides hiring specialists in the IT department, we hired attorneys. Of course, we needed that. And also engineers and my accountants. Really, my forte was walking the roads and doing training, motivation, and certain sort of self-reliance and self-confidence structure that I was able to onboard and build these agents. And Devin, I'll be forthright with you. I believe that most of that was taken away from me.
mm.
And as much as you believe that a coach, a teacher, or a mentor may or may not have influence, I believe it could be essential in getting the best out of somebody and having them get to different levels. And so I'm very grateful for the fact that it didn't put me out of business. But then again, it changed my business so much where instead of being a painting, now I'm a print. As I can only really have up to 50% of the people at my call center, we chose 20%. So 80% of the people that I used to see every day, like if I see them a couple times a year, and say
Mm.
whatever you want, as much as I can open channels of communication and give them positive reinforcements, there's a huge difference between that sort of retention and relationship building. But the best thing that I can do is to at least be attentive, and when I can jump on a Zoom call so I can tease them what's in their background or just smile and let them know I'm still thinking about them.
No, and so let me ask, because I've kind of shifted, and I'll give you my thoughts. I mean, so there's a bit of back and forth that is over my career. So for a portion of my career, started out just working in a normal office. I shifted to primarily working from home for several years, just or for another employer. And then I started my own firm, and I kind of reverted back to wanting people in the office and having that synergy and bouncing ideas off of it. And then, I've then now since then shifted mostly to independent contractors that are set it or change our setup and done most of it working from home, not entirely, but for the most part. But each phase has kind of been different. I used to rail against working from home, and then I figured out how we can make it work in our environment and keep it going. And so kind of how do you deal with it? Because I agree. I think there is a lot of times something that's lost if you're depending on the industry and the business. There's something lost when you're not able to collaborate, bounce ideas, see something face to face. There's just not a replacement for Zoom does not replace a face to face sitting down, throwing jokes off the walls, people paying attention, all of those things. And so is it better just to simply put down a rule, no working from home, or can you do it, or kind of what are some guidelines or thoughts?
It's a seller's market, my friend. And so as much as you want to force somebody to come into the office, they may quit. And they might find another place that offers other options for them. It depends. It really take it by case basis. I'd love to work with you. I'm sure that even if you had a HQ, it would still be a very professional and fun environment. Plus, it'd be fun to have lunch with you all the time. I mean, you're a great guy.
Sure.
But really, it depends on your scalability, how you want to grow. I myself, if I have to hire hundreds and 50% of them say I will only work from home, and you realize that these are individuals that can put the puck in the net, I might just want to meet them in the middle. Maybe anything and nothing, Devin. Why don't you just come in for a week or 2 weeks so we can do the training? I can give you a computer, at least know you, and then I'll let you go home. And so you depend on what you want to do. I don't know if you want to bend someone to break them. And it's not as easy as it was before. But when there are people that have to travel an hour to get to my office and an hour home, and that's a good day on the bus without traffic or an
Mm.
accident, it's because there weren't a lot of jobs in their hometown or the pueblo that paid as much as going into the city. And so if this individual, let's just look at it this way. If they've been with me for years and earned their stripes, it's not trusting them, it's giving back and knowing that saving them 2 hours, 10 hours a week minimum for gasoline or time with their family, knowing that I can get as much, if not more production out of them because they're grateful for that. The only thing I'm missing is them. And that's it. But
Mm.
no, my friend, and you and I know perfectly well that if you can get the individual that's willing to leave something on the table, come into the office for the code red or for the serious meeting or just to see you, And those are the individuals that I believe will be growing with the company. I don't know how many positions you have that need that individual. Could be a handful, but if you're just looking at your core group of people, you'll find them. But if you're looking of, once again, in these independents, dozens, if not hundreds, then take it as you can get it. And then maybe by creating something in your environment, which not just offering them cookies and coffee to come in, but having some sort of interaction that has to be done there to enhance the rapport, the bonding, or that just on-site experience, then it does make sense for them to come in and, um, maybe get them out of their house a little bit. The one
Mm.
thing that I hear that most people say is, hey, it's great to see people. I never see anybody. Well, if anything, of nothing, why don't you just practice those social skills and just do a high five or a hug to someone that you haven't seen in a while? And putting business aside, I think those are the sort of things that might give you some mileage and distance.
No, and I think that's a fair point. I mean, I think it's a hard one, and I think that that's why everybody's grappling with it, because I think that if I were to play, and I guess I always play devil's advocate as an attorney, but I think that the worry or concern is a couple. One is if you have a strong culture which is based around people being in the office, it is hard to replicate that when a large portion is dispersed. In other words, if you have camaraderie, hey, we get on the whiteboard, we write things down, we figure things out. Hey, I have a question, I'll just pop my head into the office. It's a much different thing when you're having to set up a Zoom meeting, and even if you do Slack and some of those other, it just doesn't feel the same, at least for me. But I think the other thing that the employers are often nervous about is, whether or not you're going to get that productivity. In other words, and all, without calling out the person's name, I always have to laugh because I read a LinkedIn post about, somebody, their intent was is to highlight the merits of working from home, and they say, how great it is. I sleep in later. I will get up, I'll have breakfast with my wife, we'll go on a walk, and then I'll go into work for a couple hours, and then I go and I ride on my bike and exercise, and then I'll work a couple more hours, and I usually knock off early to go play golf. And to that one, that individual saying life is great and I love working from home, and yet a lot of the employers I know are saying, it sounds like he's working for 4 hours a day and I'm paying him for 8 hours a day. And, how is this fair? And I'm not getting the productivity. And so I think that people are trying to figure out, how do I keep the culture, and also how do I keep productivity up? Any thoughts on that, or how you might deal with that?
It's the worst is to keep score and to do tit for tat. It's almost like the commissioned artist. Sure, they'll produce some artwork for you, but when they're not being paid and they're not on a time constraint, they'll do well. I
Hmm.
used to have a professor in college that would allow you to take more than class time if you wanted it. You didn't need 15 minutes if you wanted to spend 2, 3 hours there. As long as you're not cheating, you could take your time and write your composition. And
Hmm.
I thought that was fascinating because just by reducing that sort of pressure, I did better. But let's talk about your golfing friend that works 4 hours a day. Is he your top producer?
He's not mine. I'll put it as a
Is he
LinkedIn
your
post. But
ace?
yeah.
Is he the man? Because there are perks that come with that. If somebody that puts in 40 hours a week can't match what this guy's doing in 20, say what you want to say. There are people out there that are just incredible scratch golfers.
Hmm.
And so I am willing to, as long as they are giving what the company wants and they're not cancers to the company and they're not producing bad habits in others, then I believe that I can work with somebody like that. But if you're talking about an extra $10 an hour that you paid somebody to be on the clock for you when he's producing you 400 before noontime, leave him alone. Those are the sort of things you have to put yourself in their shoes. But I
So,
once
uh,
again don't believe that keeping score is a smart thing because they'll throw it back at you if they are producing.
no, and I definitely agree. And so, but now I'm going to push back, and I just think it's a fun conversation. So don't really feel like I'm pushing back to argue. More of just I always, or it's a great, I think a great point of people a lot of are grappling with it. So now, if you're to take, you know, the call center industry, one of the things, and you can correct me wrong, so I'm by far not an expert, but with call centers is, as far as I'm aware, you have to have people there and available to actually take the calls. In other words, the worst thing, at least from my end of call centers, or when I'm trying to get customer service or anything else, is when you call and there isn't anybody there, right? So if I'm calling customer service, nobody picks up. nobody's there. I have to go through a dial tree, and then it tells me it'll call me back in 2 hours, and it really calls me back the next day, which has happened. Or vice versa, if you're saying, hey, we're doing a call center, we're doing outbound calls, and we need to have, people, kind of butts in the seat, so to speak, or people actually making the calls in order and having those conversations. Either way, it does seem like you do have to have, it is not an hours game, but you do have to have those hours there that people are available to do the work. And so how do you balance? Like that one seems like it's one where, as great a producer as you are, if you're only there 4 hours and the job requirements are such that you need those hours, that still is kind of, or for some industries, address or still incites kind of those concerns by a lot of employers.
Excellent point you brought up, counsel. Now, in order for the people here to receive their full benefits, they need to put in 40 hours a week. Your
Mm,
4 hour golfing buddy, he might be an outbound prospector. Fine, let him work on commission-based or performance-based projects and still pay the taxes on it. God bless that individual. Now you're talking about workforce management, staffing accordingly. It is the responsibility of the client to make sure that people are there, depending on the talk time. If it's not that extensive of a phone call, more of a glorified answering service, and it's sporadic in regards to the volume that comes in, my suggestion would be to do a pay per call, pay per minute blended center
mm,
that can always have an overstaff of agents that can handle the basics. But if you're looking at intake coordination, trying to bring on clients for a law firm, these individuals require a lot more extensive training and dedication. So you may want to have these dedicated structured agents there for specific business hours like I do at my center. If there is an overflow, sure, you can have the answering service for the call back. So it
mm.
really just all depends. And I agree with you. The worst thing somebody wants is to be in some IVR doing a lot of waiting in a queue. It's only going to heighten your anxiety and get you to start cursing and yelling at people. And so I think if somebody can structure that sort of support, or at least they're speaking to somebody live and making progress, that will do a lot for you and your clients.
No, and I think that that's probably where I've come to the conclusion. That's why I kind of vacillated back and forth, is because I think that it is situational dependent. In other words, you point out, hey, if this is a person that's a top performer and for their job position, they only need to work 4 hours a day, or their 4 hours is more valuable than some of my other employees' 8 hours, then you're going to put up with, you're not put up with it, but you're going to be accommodating of it. And yet vice versa, if on the other hand you're saying, no, I need these hours because it is a intensive process where they need to be doing something, and it can't just be 4 hours a week or 4 hours a day, because it doesn't lend itself to that position. That's where I think it seems to be where employers are starting to figure out is, what are the positions that can be reasonably done, work from home, the performance is still there. What are the positions that need to be in the office or need to have the hours, and how do you figure that out? And it still seems like people are figuring that out and evolving. And it's also, to your point as before, it's a matter of, is there enough employment demand, or is there enough or job demand? And a lot of times you adapt with what you have to, or with what you have available within your industry.
That's why we've been able to grow, because we have such a good skill set here in a labor force that if somebody finds that frustration or challenge, they're not
Mm.
beholden. So they can give us a half a dozen seats to handle their inbound or outbound calls for them. So we can offset any sort of challenges that they may have so they can focus on other areas of their business.
No, I think that's a great point. So, well, let's shift gears a bit, and I could go on for that all the time. And the interesting thing is, if you'd asked me 2 years ago, I probably would have preached, and I'll give the insight. So we use a lot of independent contractors, and for me, and as I said, it's situational or specific. I always used to look at attorneys as, hey, I know how many hours generally a project's going to take, and if you just don't put in the hours, your work product's not going to be that good. And so there was always a fear that they go work from home. One, they're going to miss a whole bunch of deadlines, which I can't have because there's a lot of critical deadlines, and clients are going to be unhappy that it's taken so long. And two, they're going to be not going to be efficient enough to get things done within the time frames they need to. So I was used to preach against that. And where we ended up shifting, we just moved it to, hey, it is a paid for performance. In other words, you pay for the project. When you get it done, you will get paid. And if you want to be less efficient, you still have your deadlines you have to meet. But if you want to go out, take a day off, go golf or whatever, then I don't have to worry about it because you're getting paid by the end product, not by the number of hours you put into it. So it seems like that's kind of how we figured it out. But it was over a course of a lot of time and trying things that didn't work and trying incentive plans and other things.
Mhm.
With that said, now shifting gears. So one of the other things that I think that you'd brought up and we talked a little bit about before, which is also an interesting point, is, you know, within any industry, and I'm sure in the call center industry specific, you have words matter. And I would say that, I'm in an industry where words really matter, the legal industry, and particularly with patents and trademarks, you have to get the word specific and you have to look at the rhetoric, the delivery, and the word choice. So how do you go about learning that skill or figuring that out, or kind of why do words matter?
That's a great question. My major in college was public speaking, rhetoric, and nonverbal communication, also was a Spanish major. So I'm a linguist. And I know that it can open doors and it can assist you in regards to your message delivery. You know this, especially winning your big court cases. And so I try and I succeed in knowing that the agents, what they're doing, by learning a second language is 10 times harder than any project I'll put them on. So that's number one. Second, by speaking a second language shows cognitive skills, structure, and discipline. I will expand on their vocabulary by using the thesaurus because I believe similes can give you a positive or negative reinforcement. For an example, switching words like help and using assist, guide, and lend a hand. We like to ask for clarification, for edification. There are certain soft skills where we've learned to fall on certain swords because when we show active listening, it reduces any sort of tension and people realize that we are engaged in the conversation. I believe military alphabet is a very big arsenal for you because you might be, I guess, embarrassed or concerned by pronouncing somebody's name, or you might think that you understand how they spell their email address. That's the worst thing, is to have something kicked back. And so there is nothing wrong with breaking down somebody's exotic and unique name. And it's something that shows respect. And
Hmm.
secondly, if you are going to be showing some sort of accuracy and structure, you should send your email through the first time that doesn't bounce back. And also, I believe that when you're speaking with individuals that'll be working with the decision maker or part of the program, they deserve positive escalations. You should do it verbally and in writing. Just an assistant, a secretary, a gatekeeper, someone you got transferred to in the mailroom by accident, mention these individuals. Why? Because there's a very good chance when you call that company back or that family back, you may be speaking with that individual, or prior to any sort of contract, it shows the respect that you have working with them. These
Hmm.
are the old school skills that I grew up with. And so, sure, I could discuss with you more advanced telemarketing and when to land the rebuttals, when to use the name drops and the pronouns, and how to ask open ended questions when you're giving a long list of items. But really, it's just more about being attentive and asking a follow up question or remembering an anniversary or somebody's promotion, a
Hmm.
grandchild's name or a dog's name, because that can really get somebody to relax and readjust their tone on the phone with you. Because let's say there is elevation and somebody may be frustrated on a tone. I believe in a buffer boomerang technique where you can buffer that negative tone by doing a name drop, letting you know, Devin, that's an excellent question, repeating the question for active listening, and then
Hmm.
sending it back to you in a positive way. So there are many different techniques to adjust tones. And then finally, there are some tell signs that individuals give to you. It could be someone you've spoken to 100 times or a first time call. I believe that you should be analyzing their rate and their pitch on how they speak, not their tone, because that's my consistent variable. I should always be confident and empathetic. But if an individual spikes in regards to how loud or how fast they speak, backing it up by an answering speed, I believe that's just the perfect times to interject and ask for a clarifying or rebuttal or tie down question. And so these are certain things where there's no crosstalk, there's no interruption, there's a very good back and forth, there's a flow. And really what you're doing is giving your client the direction to open up more and to speak with you guiding them with specific, strategic, and tactful questions. You will be reducing talk time. Chances are these individuals will be referring your business to individuals and talking about you. Or if worst case scenario, giving you an exit interview and telling you what you could have done differently or what your competition has done in order to earn their business. So as
Mm.
long as you and your clients are willing to see this as an investment in a process, keep an open mind and put your egos aside, there's no reason why those skills could not be advanced to the point of where these conversations are flawless and effortless. And you'll realize that you'll be converting a lot more calls into clients.
No, I think that definitely makes perfect sense. One question is, so, there are some people that are just naturally good orators or naturally good at being conversationalists or whatever you want to call, where they can just hold a conversation. A lot of those skills just come naturally. Hey, I reflect what you just stated so that I can make sure I understand it. I repeat it back to you. I use, or colloquial terms that make it so it's more personable. I establish a relationship of trust. And there are others that, in background is I did engineering, and most engineers are not good communicators. They're very good problem solvers, not very good communicators. And I hopefully found a balance between both. But I think, other people, it just is a difficult thing. They can problem solve very well, but they're not good communicators, or at least not naturally. So is that something where, whatever industry, including the call center, but even in general, is that something that can be reasonably taught? Or is it something that, hey, if they don't have it, you should move on to someone that has that more natural ability?
It's just like everything else, dedicated practice. You studied your law, people study golf, medicine, musical instruments, drawing. And it's the one thing that we use all day, every day. And most people can be lazy about their speech. And so if you can record yourself, which thankfully we have the technology today, you should really listen to yourself. And most people say, hey, Devin, I just don't like how I sound. Well, that's what you got, champ. And so I think that maybe these individuals should practice their timing, their tone, their speaking levels, how fast they're speaking. I mentioned the word choice, or potentially they should be studying certain areas. Let's say they see Al Pacino doing a scent of a woman's speech. Maybe they should take certain excerpts of that or transitional sentences from that and practice it. I mean, these individuals that you work with, these attorneys and engineers, they're geniuses. Geniuses. They're brilliant. There's no reason why they can't properly deliver their message. Here's the thing, it's not sincere, it's choppy, it's forced. It's not saying that they don't care about it and they don't have good intentions. There's no muscle memory to that having to stand up and give a presentation. Or if they're scientists are fascinating because they love when their ideas are challenged, and they respect the other colleagues that they have, like these chess masters. Instead of competing, really what they want to do is get into these groups and outthink and out question one another. And they do it with such good faith so they can only get better. And so if these individuals learn to ask follow-up questions or to take their time and allowing someone to speak first, and there's nothing wrong with not being engaged, just write down everything that the other individual did. And then when they're finished, you can go through point by point, not wanting you to act like somebody else, but there is some sort of courtesy you can have. And there are some sort of ways in which you can not feel pushed in a corner or dominating a conversation. And if these individuals are planning on really speaking for others, growing and making tens of millions of dollars, this may be expected of them. I heard something interesting that when you become a general in the military, that they send you to a certain school for public speaking and relationship building. Of course, you're going to be at dinners and you're going to be meeting with individuals. And
Mm.
these brilliant minds should find that medium where their action causes a very good reaction. And all they need to do is dedicated practice and analyze their speech, because self-analysis is for self-improvement. And they'll know when they're interrupting or speaking too fast, or they just didn't like how they sound. And it's very simple. After a couple of weeks, it becomes a habit. And that would be
Mm.
my only suggestion for these individuals that really took the tough way. They're the 99% of the real challenge they're able to pull off, and the 1% is just the delivery. Put some garnish on it. Make it nice. That's all you need to do. Put some extra cheese on it, and you'll do just fine.
No, I think that's some great insight and great takeaways. So we're starting to wrap towards the end of the episode, and a lot more things that I could ask, but there is one that I or just kind of was interested in that I thought before we wrap up with the final question that I would ask on, which is, one of your kind of KPIs for call centers and key performance indicators, basically whether or not you're doing a good job or a bad job, whether you're an employer, employee, and kind of how you rank, but those performance indicators. And I think that the difficulty or sometimes when you look at KPIs, because you have kind of the attention, right? So call centers, at least some people view by it is a numbers game, where you have so many calls coming in, you need to get through the call as quickly as you can so that you can get the next call, so you don't have a long wait time. Because if you have a long wait time, people get frustrated because they have a simple question or they're needing help and they're having to wait forever. And yet, by the same token, if you rush through the thing, you really don't help them, and you're not really that or able to assist them, then they're also frustrated. So it's kind of those or tension between need to get it done as quickly as you can while also addressing their issue and making them feel like they're taken care of. So how do you kind of balance those or different performance indicators with a call center?
First is it's workforce management. You have to staff accordingly. Secondly, I know the KPIs that they judge you on is first call resolution, handle time, talk time, wrap up time, you name it. But why pressure someone to take 100 calls a day when he's doing 89, which means that he's speaking to less people, longer talk time, but his conversion ratio is more. And as I mentioned, if it takes 3 more minutes for you, Devin, to put your dog outside because it's barking in the background and you're excusing yourself and I'm being very patient, that's 3 minutes. And that could happen a couple times a day, which could ruin your KPIs. Should I
Mm.
rush Devin or should I have the dog in the background ruining the call? And so I don't want someone to overextend those times or take advantage of it. But there is a sweet spot, and especially in your industry, sir, you are dealing with individuals that might be going through the best or the worst day of their life. And you need to take that into consideration and show some empathy because someone might need to get it out or give an example of what happened at their last attorney or what they're expecting from an attorney. So there's no misguided expectations there.
Mm.
And I believe in Wu Wei. When you force a fit, it just doesn't feel right. You're squeezing into a shoe. But there are other times when things flow so well that instead of me speaking to someone 2 or 3 times, which could add up to 30 minutes, my 8 minute conversation could save myself that additional 22 minutes because I did things the right way.
Mm.
And I just don't want you to start looking at those sort of numbers. My friend, every single phone call is unique. It's one at a time, and they should be treated accordingly. So not only they give you the business, they talk about the business, and you're going to have them for decades. And so if you're talking about the rushing on the phone, well, then hire 3 more people. What happens if we overstaff? Well, then listen to some recordings or do things in between phone calls to get them warmed up for when somebody does come in. Or potentially, if things are even slow and I'm transferring a phone call to you, Devin, then
Hmm.
why don't I do a warm transfer? Stay on the line because there's no calls coming in yet for another 6 minutes. And why don't I put myself in mute and listen to my main man take the call from there and start answering questions? Or I might learn something from you that I can use to move the ball forward on my calls. And a lot of my clients love to do that when we have additional time because we've overstaffed to allow the people to do a warm transfer and stay on for a while to learn what the first team is doing. And those are just ways that you could be very flexible with your crew and still handle all the calls coming in.
No, and I completely agree, and it's always and you're right in or in my industry, and I don't get most of the time I don't get I usually get the excited or good calls 95% of the time just because happen to be an intellectual property, so I'm not dealing with divorce or I'm not dealing with bankruptcy or I'm not dealing with criminal matters, and I chose that by design because I don't want that to be the mainstay of my life, or though I'm having to deal with those issues on a frequent basis. But there is that people, usually in my industry, it's more people have questions. They want to understand things. They want to get a better familiarity with the topic because they may know that they want a patent or trademark, but don't really know what it is. And so
Mhm.
you always are looking to balance. And if I try and rush you and just give them the quick answer and they walk away and they still don't really understand, they're not going to become a client, and I'm going to lose that time anyway. And if I'd spend a few more time or a few more minutes and a little bit more time, they may, helping them to walk through and understand it, they may convert into a client. But vice versa, if I do that with every call and I take an hour, offer 15-minute consults, but every consult really takes an hour, I'm eating into a lot of my other time that I'd be doing other things. So I agree that I think there's that balance to where you have to be understanding that some calls require that extra time, and yet you can't or set it up to where every call is the exception to the rule. Otherwise, there is no longer a rule. So I think that that's some great insight.
Evan, if you are not giving your big brother best friend advice, my friend, you are way out of character.
Mm,
That's you. I mean, you're brilliant, and I know your law firm and everything else you do, but it's Devin is why I'm moving forward with you.
sure.
And prior to jumping on podcasts, when you and I just talk about life and share ideas and catch up, it's a lot of fun. I mean, that's who you are. And I believe that that is the special sauce because there's 1,000 attorneys to choose and 1,000 call centers, but they choose us and they know that we have their best interests in hand. We always pick up the phone. We're willing to be straight shooters, call the balls and the strikes, but we can do it with a certain flair and style and comfort levels that make the experience much easier for people. And so, as I say before, it's almost like a doctor that has bedside manner. Yes, you did choose a certain type of law, which is less stressful, but you're still talking about people that are banking on millions in their dreams. And you're the
No,
bridge that's getting them there. And so it's very exciting to be
no,
working
and
with
I'm
you
I'm
because
completely with you. And to your point, it's always interesting that the, there's a lot of lawyers out there within my industry and lawyers in general, and most people hate them, and there's a reason why they hate them. But I do think that, my experience, a lot of times when you're looking at the best lawyers, it's oftentimes the ones that have those or people skills that are willing to listen, to be able to sit down with them, to understand what they're going through, be able to give them that strategy and make them feel comfortable. It's most of the time the successful lawyers aren't just the ones that know the law the best. It's all those other skills that come into play. And you're right, it is the one-on-one relationship you establish, not just taking care of their legal matters. So, well, we could talk for a much longer time. It'd be a great conversation, and people are saying, "Oh, this is supposed to be a half an hour podcast, and this is going to go for an hour." So we'll have to have you back on. I'd love to have a follow-on conversation on a future episode. But for today, as we wrap up the episode, I always like to wrap up with the same last question. So we'll jump to that now, which is, within your industry, what is the biggest myth, and why is it wrong?
that every single telemarketer calls you during dinner. We don't do that. If we do, we can't be friends anymore. But you've seen The Wolf of Wall Street and Boiler Room and Glengarry Glen Ross, Prime Gig, such amazing speakers. I mean, such talent. Not every vertical sells stock or
Mm.
high-end real estate. There are some incredible individuals out there that make and receive phone calls and do it ethically. And they really are artists of speech. They really have honed their crafts and they believe in it like myself. I always believe that you pack more of a punch, through voice communication than just omni-channel non-voice of chat and email support. So
No, and I think that there are those that do call during dinner, and I'll usually either do one of two things. I'll usually either hang up with them, or if I have some time, I'll usually toy with them, which I'm sure that makes you cringe. But I just say, if they're interrupting me during the time they know I don't want to talk with them, I usually nice, and if they keep trying to talk with me, then I string them along. But I think that that's a great myth to dispel, and I think that for those that are doing it well and understand, it is one of those where you're not calling them or during dinner, and you really are trying to solve a problem rather than just trying to get money out of people. So I think that's a great point and a great myth to dispel. Well, as people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above. What's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
I think they should buy a first class plane ticket and fly down here and come visit me for a little bit and hang out at the center. But they can shoot me an email or give me a call. I got a toll free number. But I also have a very large Facebook fan page, about 101,000 local Costa Rican ticos. It will give your audience a real insight in the pulse of the business process outsourcing industry in Costa Rica. We are north of Panama, south of Nicaragua, the only democratic society in Central America, no standing army, put our money back into education, 95% literacy rate. We have a neutral English accent, the best infrastructure, and people love our ecotourism. And so it's a wonderful place to be. You definitely get thousands of new fans every time I put our episodes up there. And as I say before, I cannot thank you enough, Devin, for having me back as a guest. I enjoy your work. You're a good man. And I really look forward to continuing to watch what you do.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the kind words, and definitely encourage people to reach out, connect up on Facebook, fly down there, and he'll put you up and or treat you to a great time, or any you're in between. And so with that, as we now wrap up the episode, thank you again for coming on the podcast. Now, for all of you listeners, if you can help us to share this expertise with all the startups and the small businesses out there, just go and click subscribe, leave us a review, and make sure to click share. It really helps to be able to share this great expertise with all the businesses out there. And with that, if you ever need help with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else with your startup or your small business, just reach out to us at Miller IP Law by going to strategymeeting.com. Well, thank you again, Richard, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.